I wouldn't give up 2 runs. Good morning and welcome to the Sports Debate Podcast. I am your host, BA, along with James Martin and Jack Hurst. As always, I hope you gentlemen are having a fine morning. We are going to get right into our debates. Jack's always got the great questions. So we're going to start off with, which is the greatest men's basketball team that did not win an NCAA tournament in one given year? Let me see. I'll go Jack because this is a Jack question. Jack likes these history questions.
Yeah, these one and done NCAA tournament games could be brutal for certain teams because you have to live with it the rest of your life. If you have a superior team, a clearly better team, yet somehow lose. And we don't, when we think of the greatest teams that didn't win the NCAA tournament, we don't think of those teams that got eliminated early in the tournament because usually they don't. Usually they get eliminated at the end in either the championship game or the Final Four. It comes down to the end. And then the team they're certainly expected to beat upsets them. But then again, whoever they're playing has to be a good team to get that far into the tournament as well. I mean, there's several that come to mind, and it's pretty debatable. You think of the Georgetown team that lost to Villanova, and Villanova had to shoot, like 80% in order to win that game. And they could play 50 times, and what are the chances of them shooting 80%, in any other game in those 50 games? It's virtually nil. You think of the UNLV, the running Rebels, the defending NCAA champions who obliterated Duke when they won the national title. Yet in the Final Four, they lose to Duke. They lose to Duke because Duke was more disciplined. Duke was more ready. Duke, was more technically sound. They weren't just winning on talent the way UNLV seemed to be on the Tarkanian. You look at Michigan's Fab Five, charismatic team, great team. They just couldn't get over the top, the Fab Five when they played Duke. It seems like Duke would be getting in a lot of people's way as well. Duke had one great team, too, that didn't win it one given year. And Duke had a hard time winning an NCAA title, period. And once they did, it became a little bit of a habit, but it was hard for them to actually grab their first one under Coach K. But the one I'm voting for is Phi Slama Jama. Phi Slama Jama, to me, is the greatest college basketball team that didn't win the NCAA tournament, losing that legendary game to NC State, which is part of that great documentary, 30 by 30. And again, that's a great documentary, the type you could watch over and over and over. I mean, you look who NC State had on their team. I mean, they had some dead decent players, but the only one that would be NBA ready and play, was made an impact in the NBA somewhat would have been Thurl Bailey, and he certainly came short of being, a Hall of Famer, not close, but he was a good NBA player. But you look at just the whole roster, Houston was strong, but notably, you just look at two players, Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. Are you kidding me? Clyde Drexler was part of the dream team. If Olajuwon was American, he absolutely would have been on the dream team, on the short list of players put on that team. Better player than Patrick Ewing, better center to put in perspective. So now we have Olajuwon and Drexler on the same team. I mean, you could have given those guys us three to add into the starting five, and you'd think they would have taken care of business. Yet things were going wrong for them. I have a theory the game was played in high altitude. That could have, factored into it because Olajuwon was, had to have oxygen during the game. But sometimes a team is just out of sorts for whatever reason. And Houston was just out of sorts in that game, not just the players, the way they were coached by Guy Lewis in that game, where once they got a lead, rather than just play ball, they would try to hold on to the ball, which wasn't their game at all at the end. And it allowed NC State to get a couple of steals, crawl back in it, and get in a position to win, which they did. But any team that has Akeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler at the top of their game and doesn't win an NCAA championship, I mean, that to me, I can't understand it. But to me, if you had a tournament of all the teams that didn't win the NCAA tournament, I think Houston would win that mini tournament, just my opinion. So I'd say the Houston Cougars, the 82-83 Houston Cougars, are the greatest men's basketball team that never won the NCAA tournament.
Jack, look, I wrote that down as one of my answers, and kudos to you because I'm always trying to think. When I sit down and look at these questions, I'm picking your brain. I'm always looking at putting myself in your shoes and what are you thinking? What is that mind over there tinkering with over there? And I already knew you had Houston Cougars on your brain, and I said, okay. I look at it. Phi Slamma Jamma was incredible. 54-52 is a terrible loss. I mean, the last minute Lorenzo Charles dunk is what really sealed it for him. But I mean, that's. Again, they had opportunity when Drexler left. Even Olajuwon was still there. They had an opportunity against Patrick Ewing and the Georgetown Hoyas, and they still couldn't finish it. But it's devastating. But man, come on. I guess this is about eras and the time frame that we are with our specific eras. I mean, I would give you Houston, but I'm going to go with Michigan because it was five. It was just five freshmen. At the time, it was 92. I'm 17 years old. And these, we're talking about Chris Webber, Juwan Howard, Jalen Rose, Jim Jackson. I'm sorry, not Jim Jackson, but Jimmy King and Ray Jackson. Man, the Big Shorts. I remember that era, Jack. I was one of those kids that was just enamored with the Fab Five from Louisiana. Kids all over America wanted to be a part of the Fab Five, and Chris Webber was that dude, man. I just, like you said, we're talking about Olajuwon was the guy. He should have been, again, and Drexler, they should have won a championship with two Hall of Famers. But you got three guys that have gone on to the NBA and had great careers in their own right. Specifically, the two, Jalen Rose and Chris Howard. I mean, excuse me, and Chris Webber. But man. They ran through teams, man, and again as freshmen, five freshmen. That's what made it great. It's just that how young they were and they were the first starting freshman five to make it to a Final Four. That's just how great they were. And the two that they're going to, especially that one infamous time when Chris Webber called that timeout with a few seconds left, when they didn't have a timeout, and that was devastating. And they got a 30 for 30 themselves. It wasn't just Phi Slamma Jamma. They had their own 30 for 30 as well and that's one I can watch over and over again because it's just what could have been. I just think that specifically to me, we're splitting hairs here. I mean, because again, I was on the fence about the Phi Slamma Jamma, but I only went with this team because they had three great players on that team and they were all young. And that's what made it impressive is that they could have won, and then they had an opportunity to do it again. They lost against Duke and they lost against North Carolina, but I'm going with Michigan.
Well, if you're going to count my answer with Houston, I would have counted it with Georgetown, because just the idea that the following year Houston lost to Georgetown. So it showed how good Georgetown was. And then the year after that, Georgetown loses to Villanova. So you can make the argument Villanova just had this crazy game in which they shot around 80%. I think it was 80%. I like to look at the personnel. I like to look at the 1-2 punch of Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. That 1-2 punch is stronger than any other 1-2 punch that never won the NCAA tournament. I mean, I could make it. Olajuwon certainly better than Chris Webber, who was a great player. Don't get me wrong. Chris Webber was a great player. I'm not downplaying him. I can argue Clyde Drexler was a better player than Chris Webber. That's more arguable, That's up more for discussion. Olajuwon isn't, you could discuss it, but he was better than Chris Webber. Most teams would have picked him over Chris Webber if they had a choice. Webber,
sure.
Clyde Drexler, it would have been split, I kind of think.
Well, I mean, yes, you had two players. Let me come in and I'll let you go. Two players versus three great players. Okay, let's see. You had two legendary Hall of Fame players on one team in Houston versus three great players on one team, that would go on to have good careers. They were not great Hall of Fame careers, but at some point, those guys, two of those guys might get into the Hall of Fame. So, but I would agree with you that Olajuwon is the best of all the players there, and Drexler, like you said, you can argue, but Drexler was a great two guard in the NBA. It's the reason that they got to Portland got to a championship or two with him. So,
yeah, I'll have to say that my team, and I've seen this. This is also in the '90s. It was the beginning of the '90s, actually. UNLV. UNLV was 27-0, and they were going to go they're going to be the first team to go undefeated since the 75-76 Indiana squad. But of course, they were upended by the Christian Laettner, Grant Hill, Bobby Hurley led Duke Blue Devils 79-77. They had Larry Johnson, Stacey Augmon, Anderson Hunt, and Greg Anthony on that team. They were dominant. That was a dominating team. In fact, the year before, they destroyed Duke, as you said before, 103-73 in the national final. So I think UNLV had like one of those squads that could have probably went 3 or 4 or 5 years, and they were pretty much. If it wasn't for Duke starting to get off, I think UNLV would be probably the other team that was probably the most dominant in the early 90s like that. Because, I know I think first 4 years of the 90s, they were a really good team. But I think that when they lost to Duke the second time, when they lost to Duke in the second time after going 27-0, eventually finished in 34-1. That kind of let them fall, kind of made them fall off. It was kind of something like a mental state or something like that. I have no idea what was going on through their mind, but that team was really good team. And to destroy Duke the way they did the first time, coach, I'm not a big Duke fan, so anytime anybody destroys Duke is great for me. But yeah, that would be my team, UNLV. Anyway. Let's see. All right. So the next question that we're going to end up with is, should the Minnesota Vikings move on from JJ McCarthy? Go ahead, James.
So JJ McCarthy, I'm not going to say he's been a failed experiment so far because he's only had 2 years as a quarterback, but in the climate that we live in right now, or that the NFL plays in right now, is pretty much you know, throw a guy into a situation, and speaking only from not what I would do, but speaking what the NFL is currently doing, throwing a guy into a situation and see if he can swim. And if he can't swim in the first couple of years, we move on. And, because supposedly there's a climate that quarterbacks can be coach killers. They can, make or break an organization. And I'm right now, the way things are, the way that you're looking at what they're doing in the offseason, they brought in Kyler Murray. For me, I think Kyler Murray is going to be the starter. I mean, regardless of the competition, quarterback competition, just basing off what their talents are, what they can do between the two, I think Kyler Murray is going to be the starter. And then they also brought in Carson Wentz. So bringing in Carson Wentz, would he be the third quarterback and JJ be the second quarterback, or does Carson Wentz beat him out? Because if you look at last season, Carson Wentz played a lot better than JJ McCarthy. So maybe, to me, I think this might raise some red flags and alert, my antennas, because you're looking at maybe they want to move on from JJ McCarthy and trade him before the draft to get some draft capital, give it to a team that feel like they can develop him. I don't know what the coach is thinking. This is the guy, Kevin McConnell, he's supposed to be the quarterback whisperer, where he can do things with a certain quarterback, but I don't know specifically if JJ McCarthy is Kevin O'Connell's guy. We'll see. But I think there's a potential that he may get traded, or, before the draft, or he may get let go or traded after the season is up, or before the trade deadline in mid-season. So we will see. But I think that McCarthy time in Minnesota may be up.
I gotta laugh. Draft capital. What the heck are you talking about? What do you think the Vikings could get for JJ McCarthy, a 5th round draft choice? I mean, what kind of draft capital? They're not going to get anything significant for him at all. Despite what the Vikings say about there being a quarterback competition, there's no quarterback competition at all. Kyler Murray's the starter, case closed. The reason they don't say it is just in case Kyler Murray gets injured, they make it seem like, JJ may have been the starter all along. He never really lost the position. So they play it out. They say, well, it's a quarterback competition, but JJ McCarthy knows he's not starting the season. The only way it happens is through an injury to Kyler Murray, and also if Kyler Murray, by some chance, I doubt it, shows complete indifference when he comes to training camp. He's just not with it. He's just not interested. And even then, it's no more than a 50-50 chance of JJ McCarthy starting the season. Carson Wentz is not coming back to be a 3rd-string quarterback. He's coming back to be the backup. Everyone understands that Carson Wentz can be the 2nd-string quarterback on a number of NFL teams. There are a few teams out there who would use him as a 2nd string, and not as a starter, but as a backup quarterback. But he wants to stay with the Vikings, in part because he grew up a Viking fan. He obviously likes being on the Minnesota Vikings. And he also knows if anything happens to Kyler Murray, who's injury prone, he has a chance to be the starter. If it comes down between Carson Wentz and JJ McCarthy, it's a toss-up. But with that said, the Vikings, you feel the Vikings should move on from JJ McCarthy, right?
No, I don't feel. I'm just saying, I'm speaking from what the Vikings probably will do. I don't think they should move on from him.
What will you do? Don't tell me what you think, the Vikings, and dodging the issue. There's a question out there. It's a debate. Don't tell me. Of
course, it's a debate. I'm just telling you. I'm speaking from what
you never made it clear.
I'm not a GM. I can't speak what I would do. I mean, for me, I'm telling you
what you would do. That's what the debate show is. Do you think the Vikings should move on from JJ McCarthy?
I do not think they should move on from him, but I'm telling you what they're probably going to do. I said that what they going to do. I can debate that direction. I'm saying they're
But
probably
you
going to move
feel
on
they
from him.
should move on. You feel they should move on from him. Is that what you feel?
I do not feel they should move on from him. I'm
You
just
feel they
telling you
should
what.
keep him.
Yes, I do feel they should keep him, but I'm just thinking. I'm just debating. I know what the team is going to do. I'm telling you what the team is probably going to do. I may disagree with what they're going to do, but they're probably going to move on from him. I just think they're going to move on from him.
I don't.
Just
And my feeling is no. I mean, I don't think they are going to move on from him, but they should move on from him because J.J. McCarthy is not.
okay. So yeah, we're opposite. Yes, we are opposite.
There's no realistic future in Minnesota unless something happens to Kyler Murray. And the thing about it is, J.J. McCarthy's not that good. I mean, hidden in all this, he's not that good. They invested in him. That's why they're keeping him for now. That's why they're probably going to keep him and not move on from him this year at least. And Kyler Murray's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. So he's some type of insurance policy, but you can't make J.J. McCarthy a planned starter. You can't.
And I agree with you there, but this is why I disagree with you saying that they're going to keep him. Because look at your own backyard with the Jets and what they did with the number 2 overall quarterback. They shipped him off. Zach, what's the kid's name? Zach, what? Yeah, they didn't keep him long. They didn't keep him long at all. So, I mean, this is how the NFL moves now.
And that's what the Vikings should do. They're
going to do that.
They've basically done it. They have Kyler Murray and Carson Wentz this year. They don't need J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy, if he gets a chance to play, is not likely to light it up and all of a sudden become top-notch. And again, J.J. McCarthy isn't that good. If he was that good, okay, his old coach, Jim Harbaugh, would have reached out to the Vikings and probably tried to work out a deal for him to be the backup to Justin Herbert. But instead, the Chargers went for Trey Lance again. They signed Trey Lance to be their backup. And that's your red flag. Jim Harbaugh, even though J.J. McCarthy was his guy in college, he saw Trey Lance play in college. He remembers how good Trey Lance was in college. And he obviously thinks Trey Lance is better than his own guy, J.J. McCarthy. Nothing wrong with that. And they have to start a new era, the Vikings. They're kind of doing it with Kyler Murray. But as long as J.J. McCarthy's there, it's like an elephant in the room. You're going to play him this, that, and they're going to have to come up with all type of excuses like, oh, we're having a quarterback competition, when in reality, there's no quarterback competition.
I have a hunch they're going to trade him at some point, and it might be this season. I just think that to bring in the second quarterback in Carson Wentz, like you said, he's probably going to be the second string quarterback. And where does that leave their first round draft pick? As a third string guy or on the bench, doesn't have an opportunity to really play because there's a vote of no confidence in him. And I do agree with you that he's not that good. But my thing is, for me, like I said, you invested in him. So, what I would do is keep him and spend time with him a little bit and let him learn. But that's just not the climate of the NFL anymore. And I just think they're going to get rid of him. I just think they're going to trade him.
I'm going to put it to you like this. First of all, Jack, Harbaugh doesn't make all the decisions about the personnel on that team. Okay, if they got their stuff in place and that GM feels that they got the right people in place, regardless of Jim Harbaugh, okay, then that's what they're going to have. It's not that Jim Harbaugh can't go get J.J. McCarthy. It's just not what their roster is at right now. That's all there is to that. So I don't want to hear that kind of stuff. That's J.J. McCarthy is a good quarterback. I'm not saying he's elite. I think he could be a starter in the league. The problem with the Minnesota Vikings is the Minnesota Vikings. He is a victim of the circumstances that happened with that team. Okay, and that's the reason why the GM that they have no longer is employed by that team. Okay, you drafted this guy way too high in the first place. All right, And then you're slating him to start. You get rid of Sam Darnold when you really shouldn't have got rid of Sam Darnold. You should have kept him for another year and had JJ underneath him as a working quarterback. Because remember, JJ was injured for his first year, and they knew that. So, so you have to get him some kind of education under a veteran quarterback to at least, because we all know JJ is not that elite quarterback. You know what I'm saying? He's not. That's plain and simple. It's not a bad quarterback, but you got to give him some leeway. And like I said, he's the victim of circumstance. If you trade him right now, his career is over with. I'm going to tell you that right now. He might not even play no more football. His career's over with. He's not going to be a good quarterback because he's going to go to a team that has no good quarterback person there to help him out. He might get lucky, but I think he was just a victim of circumstance. So I think the Vikings should keep him. Although I kind of side a little bit with James, they're going to probably move on from him because they got Carson Wentz. And that's the by the way, Jack, that's the quarterback competition right there. It's Wentz and J.J. McCarthy. See, that's why they brought Wentz in there so they can cover their behinds about that. Because there's no way there's going to be competition between him and Kyler Murray. Or Wentz and Kyler Murray, for that matter. And Wentz is not that great of a quarterback either. Let's not be sugarcoating stuff. All right. So with that being said, they should keep JJ McCarthy. But like I said, it probably won't happen, but they should because he is familiar with that. He needs to be familiar with somebody that's going to help him out as far as being a quarterback. And this is an opportunity. Now, I'm not saying Kyler Murray is the greatest veteran to be under trying to learn stuff because Kyler Murray has his share of inopportunity times too. But at the same time, he's still a vet and he can still gather some kind of learning knowledge from him and Carson Wentz in a way. So if you got those two guys right there grooming him for the next year and he's not starting, he's holding a clipboard, that should be opportune time. And so when Kyler Murray goes, and Wentz will probably be retired by that time because, I would say J.J. McCarthy should be allowed to start again. Now, in his second stint, if they do keep him in his second stint starting and he doesn't do well, immediately move on from him. If he doesn't do good, like if he's like 0-8 or the team is not moving the ball with him effectively after he's gotten a second chance at that spot, yeah, it's time to move on for him. But I'd still try to keep him because you can't throw the quarterback out to the pasture. Like I've seen too many teams do that. And now the fact is that all these teams want their players to come in there and make impacts immediately, which is not fair because you're going from college to the NFL. That's not fair for any player. And the NFL is just, you guys want to make money in college, so you might as well be ready once you come in here. That's basically their thought process. And again, that's not good. That's not realistic. So a lot of these teams got to stop that kind of stuff too. But anyway, yeah, they need to keep them. But probably won't happen. All right. Let me get to this one because this has happened. Unfortunately, we had a death yesterday actually it was on the day before yesterday. Chuck Norris passed away at 86. One of the greater martial arts people in history with Bruce Lee. But the question here is who will ultimately have a greater legacy in martial arts, Chuck Norris or Bruce Lee? Yeah, I'm going to go with you on this one, Jack.
Yeah, this is a question of projecting down the line. Because if we had to say at this particular moment, the name of Bruce Lee has just a little more impact, but things change over time and people don't realize it. A case in point would be when Muhammad Ali retired from boxing after he won the last fight of his career. If you ask people who was a greater fighter, him or Joe Louis, by an overwhelming margin, people were picking Joe Louis as the greatest heavyweight of all time. And in fact, during that time, after Ali had initially retired, he came back for 2 fights he lost. So obviously his legacy can't go up in the 2 fights he lost, being that he didn't win another fight. I saw a bunch of fighters in the gym and they were like laughing And I went over to him to find out what was so funny. And they pointed to the guy over there and they said, he said Muhammad Ali was better than Joe Louis. That was actually laughable to guys. That's how crazy it sounds now. But now it's hard to find anyone who would pick Louis to beat Ali or say Louis was the greater fighter. They generally considered 1-2, Ali 1, Louis number 2. And that's how I think it is with Norris and Lee. I think as time goes, and decades pass, we're going to see the Chuck Norris movies, and they're going to, I think, outdo the Bruce Lee movies, okay? And with Bruce Lee, it was mystique. Chuck Norris, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, James, was more of a valid martial artist than was Bruce Lee. I mean, from what I understand.
They both came together to share philosophies, but ultimately Bruce was the teacher of Chuck Norris. And so, yeah, Chuck Norris was a karate champion prior to meeting Bruce Lee. But that being said, he learned a lot more from Bruce Lee than Bruce Lee learned from him.
Well, maybe he went along with the program because it sounded good, because Bruce Lee was more in charge of the movie making. And look, we'd see these Bruce Lee movies where he would be fighting a giant Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would have, gotten wiped out at that stage against valid fighters, who are foot shorter than he was. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a great athlete, and I'm not saying he couldn't have been a superb martial artist on a competitive basis. That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
But, it's not the same. I mean, it always amazes me the way athletes from other sports can feel they're just going to become boxers, they're going to become wrestlers, UFC guys, and they're going to make their mark. Can you imagine a martial artist? Oh, I'm going to play in the NBA. I'm going to play Major League Baseball. I'm going to play in the NFL. I mean, what are the chances of that happening? We would dismiss them. Are they out of their mind? They're not going to do this. But everyone thinks they're going to become a martial artist as far as the skill goes and this and that. And it just doesn't work that way. But Bruce Lee is legendary. He's kind of like Elvis, James Dean, etc. But you talk about Elvis or Frank Sinatra, who has a greater legacy now as time goes by. It's more, I think, Frank Sinatra. He would have passed Elvis, who I think was a bit of an icon, But I think Sinatra's body of work, and I think that's the case. Norris has more of a body of work, I think, than Bruce Lee, with films. So I think as time goes along, the films live on. And I think we have enough Bruce Lee imitators that kind of take away from Bruce Lee a little bit in that sense. I mean, it could be even a plain movie like The Karate Kid. I mean, are we going to talk about Mr. Miyagi or whatever, in that movie? But I think ultimately, I'm going to sum up. Ultimately, I think Chuck Norris is going to pass Bruce Lee as far as having a greater legacy, as a martial artist.
That's an interesting thought, Jack. I would, and when I saw this question, I thought that was like, okay, can you really compare the two? But then I went in and saw you right. Chuck Norris has a greater catalog. I mean, in quantity, quality. There are some duds in there. I've seen some of Chuck Norris's early movies. He's had some great movies. I love Chuck Norris, and I love him in his own right as an actor, as a martial artist. But man, come on. Legendary status, like you said, Bruce Lee is there. Why is he there? Bruce Lee, he only had, yes, Bruce. Let me see. Yeah, that's what the biggest thing is. If Bruce Lee had not died, would his how far would his status have grown with the a larger catalog and many other things he probably would have done? teaching other great
What would have
sports?
happened? I'm just going to answer that very quickly. I know you see
Yeah.
your turn come. Had that happened with Bruce Lee, he claimed to be the greatest martial artist in the world. He would have
Right.
been challenged and forced to test his skills against others, and that would have been his undoing. He would have gone down. I don't think he would have accepted those challenges for the simple reason he wasn't going to win. Okay, he wasn't going to beat a guy like a George Foreman in the ring. He'd get knocked out quickly.
It's about martial arts, though, not about what
Yeah.
other sport he's getting in.
He'd be
Well,
allowed
look,
to use. It's James' turn.
Let me
Sorry,
finish.
James.
Yeah, let me finish. That's okay. That's okay. But I mean, I don't think he'd get in the ring with a George Foreman. That just wouldn't be realistic. But to get into a ring with somebody closer to his size and fight, I would imagine he probably would do that. And nor would he be afraid of losing. I think the greatest fighters in the world have lost fights. So I would think, I have to dispel that argument. But with that being said, as far as who has a greater legacy, it's still going to be Bruce Lee. He's at the level of God status right now in the way people have viewed him, because he's the pioneer of mixed martial arts. Jeet Kune Do is his own martial arts. It's a mix of different things, Jack. It's a mix of boxing. Let me see, what else was it? Let me see, boxing. So Jeet Kune Do, what it was called, is the way of the intercepting fist, a blend of elements of boxing, fencing, and Wing Chun. So again, it's largely considered the pioneer of mixed martial arts. And this came from Bruce Lee, not from Chuck Norris, not from anybody else, but from Bruce Lee. And that being said, again, he taught these guys. He taught Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That was one of his students. His son, it spawned his son Brandon Lee being having some movies and a career in his own right. And also, not just that, it brought about who trained him, Ip Man. I mean, you got movies there regards to the guy who trained Bruce Lee. It was incredible. If you haven't seen those movies, Jack. Now, mind you, again, we're talking about movies, but we're talking about a guy who legitimately, look at the eye test. When you watch Bruce Lee fight, it was different, regardless of who he fought. It wasn't sped up. It wasn't CGI. It was Bruce Lee doing his own stunts and doing everything in the movie, regardless of I mean, so did Chuck Norris, but you can look at both and say, there's something different about that guy in Bruce Lee when he fights people. Whether you believe or whether or not he'll beat any and everybody, that's folklore, that's myth. Fine, the myth is out there. But there's some element of truth when you can look with your own eyes and see what somebody can do. So to me, Bruce Lee definitely trumps any, well, if we're speaking on Chuck Norris, the quality versus the quantity, it's going to be Bruce Lee totally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just with the fact that his career was short, Bruce Lee, that is, he passed at 73. I mean, the body of work that he did, and again, I don't even go by movies. This is the man was a fabulous to create your own martial art. In a sense, that's a GOAT status right there. You don't create your own martial arts. Now, Chuck tried to do that a couple of times himself. Let me tell you the difference. The legacies between these two are different. And the legacy for Chuck Norris is basically to the point that it's more in this time and age, we got all the Chuck Norris memes, a few of them here. We got Death once had a near Chuck Norris experience, or Chuck Norris was all the Star Wars movies. He was the Force, them kind of memes. And those memes are great. I every time I see those memes, they're hilarious. They get better and better each time somebody makes a meme about him. But at the same time, Bruce Lee he's still back there. He's still up over everything. I mean, he is the GOAT. To me, Bruce Lee, I'm going to put an analogy. You got Barry Sanders and Bo Jackson. Had Bo Jackson not got hurt when he got hurt, Bo Jackson probably would have been the best running back ever. I'm gonna say no.
Wait, Brian, you and James are missing the point of the question. I'm not talking about right now. Right now, Bruce Lee is ahead of Chuck Norris at the present time. Ultimately, decades from now, what's the thought process going to be? We can always
I didn't
speculate.
miss anything you said about that question. I'm still going to see Bruce Lee as that dude
Bruce Lee's still
20
gonna
years
do
from
it.
now.
Yeah,
20 years from
Bruce
now.
Lee's still got. He's still the guy. Chuck Norris has got a greater body of work, but body of work doesn't mean legacy. Body of work just means you got a whole bunch of history behind you.
The movies are going to be out, and more people.
It's the impact, Jack. It's the impact. It's the impact. I mean, everybody wanted to be Bruce Lee, and nobody's going to want to be Chuck Norris in cowboy boots and a hat and Walker Texas Ranger 20 years from now. Everybody's going to want to be. Everybody's going to want to be Bruce Lee, the guy who moves like lightning speed. I'm going to be that guy. That's who everybody wants to be.
Hey, Linda. Good morning to you.
Hey, Linda.
Hey, Miss Linda. How you doing, Miss Linda?
Linda, thanks for that nice post about Mac being proud with the book. I thought, I think of Mac often, and you as well. Hope all's well.
Same, Miss Linda.
Yeah. I think it's just. I don't think we didn't lose anything out the question. I just think Bruce Lee is. Chuck Norris, he was a champion in his own right. This is true. But
and has a legacy in his own right.
Yeah, in his own right. But I'm going to tell you who brought him into that whole situation. Bruce Lee. Because that's where a lot of Bruce Lee's movies come from, Chuck Norris and him having battles all the time. And Chuck Norris, in an interview, I think it was like 10, 15 years ago, when asked who was the better fighter between him and Bruce Lee, he said Bruce Lee was. He said he was a great fighter.
He wouldn't have gotten the parts in the Bruce Lee films. I mean, he had.
Well, Bruce Lee said, when Bruce Lee was asked the same question, of course, Bruce Lee, like any GOAT, was going to say, I'm going to beat everybody. I don't care. I'm the better fighter than Chuck Norris. But the difference between Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris, I think Bruce Lee was the better fighter.
Bruce Lee is Michael Jordan. Jordan's gonna think he's winning everything, regardless whether he loses or not. Yeah, pretty much. But he's still great in his own right. He's still great in his own right.
Yeah, Bruce Lee is like the GOAT, and then people argue about, well, Bruce Lee's better than Chuck Norris, but Chuck Norris is like LeBron. He's had the longer history, and he's breaking a lot of records. But nobody stops talking about Michael Jordan, do they?
Example with the question, but that's a good example. Yeah. We don't know what LeBron and Jordan years from now. We could pose that as a question decades from now. That's for another time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost the same thing.
Yeah.
Good job, guys. Good job. All right. And last but not least, should players be allowed to play their music in the locker room? Jack, I'm going to start with you first because
me. Yeah, I mean, this is a weird question. There's certain questions that are generic, meaning we could use them anytime. Certain other questions, it's about timing. You have to use them when you use them, otherwise they won't have the same effect. For example, this question goes round the clock, and we hear about things with. We're referring back to Bruce Lee. I mean, these questions go in every locker room, and we hear players getting mad at other players. I know when I go to boxing events, I mean, I'm hearing rap music that's so loud I can't get on the phone, and I like certain rap music, believe it or not. I actually do. I like the lyrics. I a lot of times don't listen to words. I just like the lyrics. I like the beat. I enjoy it. But I go to these fights and there's cursing, this and that, men are calling women hoes and the whole distasteful stuff is going on, but I'm not with it, okay? I'm not with it because I might object to that, and I don't want to hear it. And it's forced on me at the fights, and it's so darn loud. It's so loud I can't even make a phone call without yelling into the phone. And I mean, why is it happening? But imagine in the locker room, you come in the locker room, you're trying to concentrate on a game, and someone is playing their music, they're blasting it, and it's not your type of music. And you're telling them to tone it down, and they don't want to tone it down. And that's how teammates get into fights or whatever with the music going on. No music should be allowed in any locker room. I don't care. Let them have a headset, the earplugs and everything, and play whatever darn music you want. But I want it quiet in that locker room. I don't want it noisy. I don't want speeches. I have tremendous respect for everyone's religious beliefs. But if they're different religions, I don't want someone forcing their religion on someone else, telling them they have to be a certain way. I just, and their beliefs, their general beliefs. But it somehow always starts with music. It's blasting in there, and it's disturbing, and it's got to stop. Some teams allow it. Some teams maybe have put a stop to it, but I know it has been a problem with teams and with players. And even the players who don't say anything about it, it's annoying to them. Just like I was complaining a moment ago about I'm hearing all this, music at the fight shows, and I just, I don't want to. It's a distraction, and they've got to stop it. They've just got to stop it point blank.
Jack. I can only imagine you in a football locker room, and you would remind me of the episode, or there's several episodes in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, when DJ Jazzy Jeff said something stupid to Uncle Phil, and the next thing you know, they're showing the door, and Jazz getting thrown out of the house, because you would get thrown out of the locker room, because the majority of players, that's just the culture in football. If we're talking about a locker room, I'm saying specifically in football, they're gonna play music regardless. I think I have to agree with you as an adult, as an older adult. Because when I was younger, I'm not gonna lie, I would listen to all this music. I can't be sitting here and be hypocritical. I would play this music. I would jam to it. I'd say whatever and anything lyrics that would come out, and you get hyped. You get hyped when you're playing football and stuff like that, because you want to get ready and get on the field and go out there and knock somebody's heads off or score a touchdown, that kind of thing. So sometimes I think it just depends on the culture of the team. It depends on the culture of the mindset of the head coach, the players. If the majority agree on specifics in the type of music that's being played, if it's like has less violence or less. I mean, how can we be hypocritical and talk about less violence, and we're playing the most violent game?
James,
hold up. Let me finish. I'm just saying, we celebrate the most violent game in football and in sports, and yet you don't want anybody to say nothing violent or talk about violence. That's hypocritical. To me, now, talking about women and degrading them and calling them hoes and that kind of stuff, I agree with you. That shouldn't be taken in the music. But having, like you said, the beat, the music and stuff like that, vibes, it all depends on what the culture is in that locker room. And I think you have to consider that. And like you said, speeches, that's the whole different thing. You didn't bring that up in the question. But speeches and religious and different things like that, you have to consider those things too. I agree with you there. But I think it really depends. I don't think you should take music away if just because you have certain types of music you don't want to play. I think if you put the right music in there, maybe it's clean, you should be able to play it. If everybody agrees on it.
James, cultures are different, and it has to do with music in part. Different cultures like different music a little more. I mean, you tried to play Frank Sinatra in an NFL locker beforehand. It might not go over. Well, Elvis Presley. I mean, come on. It's the same thing with rap music in a certain sense. Can you imagine rap music is being played and a couple of white players, from down south just don't care for that type of music? the way it sounds to them, and they say, we really don't care for this type of music. Can we get something else up there? All of a sudden, that's going to cause a little bit dissension. Yeah, I mean, music is a particular taste, okay? I mean, you'd never guess a guy like myself loves the Supremes to hear that type of music from the 60s, okay? I mean, I love that. But it's different tastes and so on. And like I said before, certain rap songs, the lyrics, they have a certain beat. I enjoy listening to it until I start listening to the words on some of them, and they're outrageous, you know. And but people, you know, different types. And I'll make an exception. Take the Baltimore Ravens. They pick up on the old Baltimore Colts theme song that was played. That's a team theme song, or Notre Dame. You play the theme song of the team, the university, or whatever. That's okay, because that's generic. Everyone, I think, accepts that. No one gets turned off by that. But I'm talking about particular taste in music players, and they blast the music on top of it. It's not just quiet. They're blasting it. They're forcing it on someone.
I think contrary to popular belief, a lot of these teams do have and James brought up a good point, the culture of the team. If you actually pay attention to some of the interviews in the locker room of some of these teams, you don't hear anything. And you see a whole bunch of players sitting there with their headphones on, because that is part of what that team wants you to do. There's not going to be no music blasting all over the locker room, just for that thought process, because you're here as a team. There's no individuals, and that's the point that the team is trying to make to the players. There's no individuals in here, whereas a team, if you're going to listen to one music, everybody's going to listen to it. If you don't want to do that, then you use your own headphones and listen to your own music, you know, what you want to listen to. But there's not going to be any team music being blasted across the locker room, or different type of music blasted, whether it's country, rock, rap, R&B, whatever it is. If other people don't like it, you know, and you got to that point, Jack, that players do have, you know, when their testosterone is up and they're ready for competition, and they're going to hear something they don't want to be hearing in the locker room, they're going to get a little bit feisty about it. Like turn that stuff off. I want to hear my stuff. And we don't want to have any of that in the locker room. What we want to have is unity. So a lot of teams have bared that kind of situation from, you know, unless it's a celebration or something like that, like they win a playoff game or they win the Super Bowl, then there's no holds barred in that. But as far as a game for game thing, yeah, a lot of teams have adapted you listen to your music. We ain't gonna have all that any kind of music blasting all over the thing, no, because that's detrimental to other people who don't like that music. And then they're going to start getting mad, and we don't want to have any of that going on either. So there are teams that do that, but there are teams that don't do that, and it's the culture. So, I mean, it depends on whatever locker room you're in. I know for one thing, for the Lions locker room, you will not hear that too much at all. Any music playing in the background, you'll see the players, and they'll have their headphones on if they want to listen to music, or, you know, usually when they're in a locker room, they're more attentive and doing interviews. So you don't hear all that anyway. And that's rude to the interviewers, the people that are interviewing, the news people, because if you're trying to interview somebody and you got loud music all around you, no matter what type it is, you can't concentrate on your interview. Man, turn that down. I'm trying to do an interview in here. Be professional. That's part of it too. So,
but then, like I said, it also depends on the culture, because you have like the Saints when they were winning games and Sean Payton would be in the locker room, they'd all be dancing together. They show them at the end, they're all dancing, they're playing music, and they got the lights going. It just depends on what's agreed upon and what's going on in the culture of that locker room. And so I don't have a problem with it.
I'm thinking more before the games, okay? A little more after you've won a game, everyone is in a good mood. You can play practically anything because they're not getting ready to play the game. They're not concentrating. Everyone's let their guard down. it's not a big deal after the game's over because they're all in it, like I said, in a good mood, especially to win the game. If you lose the game, there shouldn't be music being played. And I think virtually every player understands that. Could you imagine playing your music loud after losing a game? His own teammates, his own closest friends on the team would tell him to cool it, if that were the case. But
Right.
before the game, you're getting ready for the darn game, and you kind of want to relax. You're relaxing too. I don't mean you're so high strung. You don't want to come in and have music you don't care for. That's just me. I mean,
Well, and that's what I was trying to say too, because everybody gets hyped up to different kind of music. Okay, and that's just being individual. And this is the reason why I bring up the culture of whatever team it is, because they won't do that at the beginning of the game either. They won't do that because people get motivated in their own way. So, it could even be religiously, if somebody's a Buddha, they might, pray to Buddha or something like that before the game. But there's not, as long as they're keeping it, cubed in their area, it's fine. But if you're trying to blast it all over the whole room, that's a different story, because some people don't get motivated in that certain way. So you want to kind of keep that curtailed so that people aren't beating each other up before they get out in the field. And that's the point which you want to calm down. So.
Yeah, after the games, if you lose, it's different. Players sometimes don't want to hear any type of music. There's a case where I could go back all the way to 1964 on the Yankee bus. Late in the season, they got swept by the White Sox, and they were in danger of not going to the World Series. And this player, Phil Linz, the shortstop, he's playing the harmonica on the back of the bus. And Yogi Berra, the Yankee manager at the time, goes back on the back of the bus and he slaps the harmonica out of his hand. He was disgusted how, one of his players playing any type of music. Had they won 4 in a row, he probably would have enjoyed listening to the harmonica music.
Yeah, right. Another point that you got to look at also is, like, once they get out of the locker room and they go into the stadium to do warm-ups and stuff like that, stadium music is playing. And of course, stadium music is going to be loud. No. I'm just saying this to what I'm saying though. When they have that stadium music playing, not everybody, even if it's the music that people like or the individual likes, sometimes it's just the fact that they put their noise canceling headphones on because they have different music that they warm up to, that they're motivated to. So they do that. So you'll see that. That's what they do in locker rooms now too. So you might even have somebody playing music in the background, but you see players there with their noise canceling headphones on and listening to their own stuff. But a lot of teams have incorporated not blasting music during, the beginning of the game. Like you said, the end of the game might be different if they win or something like that, if it's a big thing. But
it's a big deal to boxers going into the ring. They have their particular song. The old timers never entered the ring to music. And in fact, Mike Tyson liked to honor the old time fighters and come into the ring with no music at all. But in this day and age, it's important that they have like their song. And certain of them, certain of the songs are catchy.
Mm-hmm. But again, you're not blasting that. You're not blasting that as a team. That's an individual thing. Boxing's an individual kind of sport. So you're not blasting it for 22 other people to be hearing. So that's a difference. They can do that. All right, Rich. You have a good one, Richard. And speaking of leaving this platform, we are getting ready to finish the show today. Everybody have a very good rest of your day. NCAA tournaments all weekend long. Watch. Good games so far. For me and everybody on the panel, have a great day. See you next week.